The garage smelled like motor oil and betrayal. I was elbow-deep in my Ford's engine when I heard Lila's voice cutting through the November air like a rusty blade. "If you want me to take your offer seriously, Carson, you'll need to make it worth my while." Her tone was different, sultry, calculated, not the voice she used with me anymore. "And stop sending me those inappropriate messages during work hours." I froze, wrench suspended over the alternator. My wife stood in our kitchen doorway, phone pressed against her ear, thinking she was alone. The garage light cast shadows across her face, making her look like a stranger. "I understand the terms," she continued, lowering her voice. "But I have conditions, too. The Red Roof Inn on 5th Street, tomorrow at 6. Bring what we discussed." My hands started shaking. 22 years of marriage, and I was learning my wife spoke a language I'd never heard before. She ended the call and walked back inside. I stayed in the garage for another hour, pretending to work while my mind raced. Carson, that was her boss, Carson Mitchell, the smooth-talking executive who'd hired her 6 months ago at Meridian Financial. The same guy who'd shaken my hand at the company picnic, calling me lucky to have such a dedicated wife. When I finally went inside, Lila was making dinner like nothing happened. She smiled at me, that practiced smile she'd perfected over the years. "How's the truck coming along?" she asked, stirring something that smelled like garlic and lies. "Making progress," I said. "How was work?" "Oh, you know, same corporate nonsense. Carson's been pushing everyone harder lately. The quarterly reports are due next week." I nodded, watching her move around our kitchen with newfound clarity. Every gesture seemed calculated now, every word measured. She was performing the role of devoted wife while auditioning for something else entirely. "I might be working late tomorrow," she added casually. "Big presentation." "Sure thing," I said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "I'll probably hit the gym anyway. Reggie's been after me to spar more." That night, I lay awake listening to her breathe. She slept peacefully, like someone without secrets. I stared at the ceiling, planning my next move. The following evening, I told Lila I was meeting Reggie for drinks. Instead, I parked across from the Red Roof Inn and waited. At exactly 6 o'clock, a silver BMW pulled into the lot. Carson Mitchell stepped out, checking his watch and smoothing his tie. He looked nervous, excited, guilty. All the things a married man should look when meeting someone else's wife. 15 minutes later, Lila's Honda arrived. She'd changed clothes since leaving for work. Gone was the conservative blouse, replaced by a red dress I'd never seen before. She walked toward the motel entrance with purpose, her heels clicking against the asphalt like a countdown timer. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching their shadows move behind the curtains of room 237. When they finally emerged, Carson kissed her cheek and handed her an envelope. Business concluded. Instead of following them, I got out and approached Carson's BMW. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars and the distant hum of traffic. I pulled out my pocket knife and pressed it against his rear tire until I heard the satisfying hiss of escaping air. Then I slipped a note under his windshield wiper. "Raise denied. Try again." The security camera mounted on the motel office caught everything, including my license plate. I didn't care. Sometimes you have to make yourself visible to become invisible. 3 days later, Lila came home agitated. She threw her purse on the counter harder than necessary and poured herself a large glass of wine. "Rough day?" I asked from my recliner, not looking up from the newspaper. "Someone's been harassing Carson," she said. "Vandalized his car, left threatening notes. The police are investigating." "That's terrible," I replied, turning the page. "Any idea who might do something like that?" "Probably some disgruntled employee. You know how cutthroat corporate environments can be." I nodded sympathetically while making mental notes. She was protecting him, which meant she was invested. This wasn't just about a raise anymore. It was about something deeper, more dangerous to our marriage. That weekend, I volunteered to do the grocery shopping. While Lila showered, I borrowed her phone to check our shared calendar. She'd left it unlocked, trusting or careless. I found her text messages in less than 30 seconds. Carson. Can't stop thinking about yesterday. When can we meet again? Lila. Patience. Good things come to those who wait. But my performance review is next week. Carson. You'll get everything you deserve, and more. Lila. I better. I'm taking risks for this opportunity. I screenshot everything, transferred the images to a secure folder on my laptop, then deleted the evidence from her phone. She never noticed the missing messages, too busy planning her next move to cover her tracks properly. Sunday morning, I made pancakes and served them with fresh strawberries and maple syrup. Lila smiled across the breakfast table, complimenting my cooking while I studied her face for signs of guilt. She showed none. Either she was an excellent actress, or she'd convinced herself this was justified. I've been thinking, she said, cutting into her pancakes. We should take a vacation this winter. Maybe somewhere warm. I might be getting a promotion soon, and we could afford something nice. That sounds wonderful, I said, refilling her coffee cup. You've been working so hard lately. You deserve recognition. She beamed at me, genuinely happy for the first time in months. I realized she wasn't just cheating on me. She was auditioning to leave me. The raise was an exit strategy, a way to gain financial independence before filing for divorce. Carson wasn't just her boss, he was her escape plan. After breakfast, I drove to Reggie's gym. He was training a young heavyweight when I arrived, barking instructions while the kid pounded a heavy bag. You look like someone stole your lunch money, Reggie said when he noticed me. He was 63, built like a fire hydrant, with gray hair and scars from his boxing days. He'd been my friend since high school, back when we both thought we could fight our way to better lives. Worse, I said. Someone's trying to steal my wife. Lila? He stopped the timer and looked at me seriously. You sure about that? I showed him the screenshots on my phone. Reggie studied them carefully, his expression growing darker with each message. Well, he said finally, what are you going to do about it? I'm thinking about it. Don't think too long. Guys like this, Carson, they don't stop until they get what they want. And right now, he wants your wife. Maybe I should confront her directly. Bad idea. She'll deny everything, get better at hiding it, and you'll lose your advantage. Right now, you know something she doesn't think you know. That's power. Reggie was right. Direct confrontation would only force them underground. I needed a different approach, something surgical, precise, devastating. That evening, I researched Carson Mitchell online. His LinkedIn profile painted him as a successful executive with an MBA from Northwestern and 20 years in financial services. His Facebook page was more revealing, photos of expensive vacations, charity galas, and his wife Pamela at various social functions. She was attractive, well-dressed, and completely unaware her husband was negotiating raises in motel rooms. I found Pamela's contact information through the company directory. She worked part-time as a fundraising coordinator for the local children's hospital. Her email address was listed on their website. Monday morning, I created an anonymous email account and composed a message. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm writing to inform you of a situation involving your husband that you should be aware of. I have evidence of inappropriate conduct between Carson and one of his employees. This information is being provided for your protection and legal consideration. Please see attached documentation. A concerned party. I attached the screenshots, time-stamped and clearly showing Carson's phone number and Lila's responses. Then I scheduled the email to send in exactly 2 weeks. Enough time for them to get comfortable, maybe even careless. For the next 14 days, I maintained perfect normalcy. I cooked dinner, watched television, made small talk about work and weather. Lila continued her performance as well, though I noticed she was checking her phone more frequently and staying late at the office twice a week. On Wednesday of the second week, she came home with shopping bags from an expensive boutique downtown. What's the occasion? I asked, watching her hang up a new dress that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget. "Just felt like treating myself," she said. "Carson mentioned there might be some client dinners coming up. I want to look professional." "You always look professional," I said, meaning it. Whatever else she was doing, Lila had always taken pride in her appearance. She smiled and kissed my cheek. "You're sweet. I'm lucky to have such a supportive husband." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Thursday morning, my scheduled email delivered itself to Pamela Mitchell's inbox. I imagined her opening it over coffee, maybe in the sunroom of their suburban home, expecting another fundraising inquiry or volunteer opportunity. Instead, she got a front-row seat to her husband's extracurricular activities. Friday afternoon, Lila called me at work. I was installing kitchen cabinets in a new subdivision, my hands covered in sawdust and my back aching from crawling around on tile floors. "Can you talk?" she asked, her voice strained. "What's wrong?" "Something's happened at the office. Carson's wife filed for divorce. She apparently had evidence of inappropriate conduct. HR is investigating." I set down my drill and walked outside where my co-workers couldn't hear. "That's terrible," I said. "What kind of evidence?" "Text messages, photos, I don't know exactly, but it's bad, really bad. Carson's been suspended pending investigation." "How does this affect you?" There was a long pause. "It doesn't. I mean, he's my boss, so there might be some reorganization, but I wasn't involved in whatever he was doing." She was lying smoothly, but I could hear the panic underneath. Her carefully constructed plan was collapsing, and she couldn't figure out who had lit the fuse. "I'm sure everything will work out," I said. "You're a good employee, the company knows that." "Yeah," she said, not sounding convinced. "I'll probably be late tonight. Lots of meetings about the transition." "Take your time. I'll pick up dinner." After we hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. Carson's marriage was over, his career was in jeopardy, and Lila's promotion prospects had evaporated. But this was just the beginning. That evening, I stopped at the florist and bought 24 red roses, the same color as the dress she'd worn to the motel. When Lila came home, I presented them with a smile. "What's this for?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "Do I need a reason to buy flowers for my wife?" She buried her face in the roses, inhaling their scent. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, young, hopeful, grateful for small gestures of love. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed this today." I kissed her forehead gently. "We'll get through whatever's happening at work. We always do." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I wondered if they were tears of guilt, relief, or genuine emotion. Maybe all three. As she arranged the roses in a vase, I watched her hands shake slightly. The pressure was getting to her. Good. Pressure creates cracks, and cracks reveal weaknesses. Over dinner, she told me about the chaos at Meridian Financial. Carson's suspension had created a power vacuum, with various executives jockeying for position. The HR investigation was expanding, looking into all of Carson's professional relationships. "They're interviewing everyone who worked closely with him," she said, picking at her salad, making sure there weren't any other situations. "Are you worried about the interview?" "No," she said quickly. "I mean, I worked with him, but everything was professional. I have nothing to hide." I nodded encouragingly while cataloging her tells, the way she touched her neck when lying, how her voice pitched slightly higher under stress, the unconscious gesture of covering her mouth after saying something untrue. After dinner, I helped with the dishes while she took a long bath. I could hear her on the phone through the bathroom door, speaking in hushed tones to someone. Probably Carson, trying to coordinate their stories before the HR interviews. When she emerged, wrapped in her terry cloth robe, I was watching the news on the couch. "Feel better?" I asked. "Much." She curled up next to me, resting her head on my shoulder. We sat in comfortable silence, watching a story about local politics, It felt almost normal, like the old days before ambition and opportunity had poisoned our marriage. "Jack?" she said softly. "Yeah? Do you ever think about what you'd do if you won the lottery, like, really won big?" I considered the question. Probably pay off the house, maybe buy a boat, take that trip to Ireland we always talked about. Why? I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if we're settling for less than we deserve, if we should be taking more risks, pursuing bigger opportunities. Are you unhappy? She was quiet for a long time. Not unhappy, just restless, I guess. Like there's something more out there, and I'm too scared to reach for it. What would you reach for? I don't know yet, but when I figure it out, I hope you'll support me. I always have, I said, stroking her hair. Whatever you want to pursue, we'll figure it out together. She squeezed my hand. I love you. I love you too. And in that moment, I meant it. Despite everything she'd done, despite the betrayal and deception, I still loved the woman she used to be. The woman who might still exist underneath the ambition and desperation. But love wasn't going to stop what came next. Some lines, once crossed, change everything forever. Lila had crossed that line the moment she walked into room 237. Now, we were both living with the consequences. Monday morning brought news that Carson Mitchell had been terminated for violating company policy regarding professional conduct and abuse of authority. The official statement was corporate speak, but everyone at Meridian Financial understood the subtext. Lila came home that evening looking like she'd aged 5 years in one day. They cleaned out his office, she said, collapsing onto the couch. Security escorted him out at 10 a.m., 20 years with the company, and they walked him out like a common criminal. I brought her a glass of wine and sat beside her. What happens to his department? They're bringing in someone from the Denver office to take over temporarily. Janet Reeves. She's got a reputation for being thorough. Thorough how? She reviews everything, every decision, every hire, every promotion recommendation. If Carson promised anyone anything, she'll want documentation. I could see where this was heading. Carson had promised Lila a promotion based on their arrangement, but he couldn't document those promises without incriminating himself. Now, Lila was stranded. No promotion, no raise, and a new boss who would scrutinize every aspect of Carson's management. I'm sure your work will speak for itself, I said. You've always been dedicated. Dedicated, she repeated bitterly. Right. Tuesday morning, I drove past Meridian Financial on my way to a job site. Carson's BMW was parked in the lot behind the building, which struck me as odd since he'd been terminated. I made a mental note to investigate later. That evening, Lila announced she'd been scheduled for an HR interview on Thursday. Just routine, she said, though her hands were shaking as she poured herself another glass of wine. They're talking to everyone who reported to Carson. What will you tell them? The truth, that he was professional, demanding, but fair, that I never saw any inappropriate behavior. She was getting better at lying, but not good enough. The truth was seeping through the cracks in her story. Wednesday night, I volunteered to work late so Lila could prepare for her interview. Instead, I drove to Meridian Financial and parked across the street. At 7:30, Lila's Honda pulled into the lot. She wasn't alone. Carson's BMW was already there. I watched them meet near the back entrance. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in their body language. They were arguing about something, gesturing frantically. After 10 minutes, Carson handed her an envelope, and they separated. Lila sat in her car for a long time before driving away. I followed Carson instead. He drove to a bar called Murphy's on the east side of town, a dive where corporate executives wouldn't normally be caught. I gave him a 5-minute head start, then went inside. The place was dimly lit and nearly empty. Carson sat at the far end of the bar, nursing a whiskey and staring at his phone. I ordered a beer and positioned myself where I could observe without being obvious. He made several calls. each conversation growing more agitated. I couldn't hear the words, but his body language told the story. He was desperate, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his career. After his fourth drink, Carson stumbled toward the restroom. I followed, timing my entrance for maximum impact. "Rough week?" I said, stepping up to the urinal beside him. He glanced over, recognizing me from the company picnic. "Jack, right? Lila's husband?" "That's right. Sorry to hear about your situation at work." His face hardened. "Yeah, well, corporate politics can be brutal. Someone decided to make me a target." "Any idea who?" "Could be anyone. Jealous colleagues, disgruntled employees, maybe even someone's spouse who got the wrong idea about a professional relationship." He was fishing, trying to gauge how much I knew. I kept my expression neutral. "People love to gossip," I agreed, "especially when someone successful falls from grace." "Success makes enemies," he said, zipping up his pants. "The key is making sure your enemies can't prove anything." Good advice. Though I imagine your wife's divorce attorney might disagree. His face went pale. "What did you say?" "Just that divorce attorneys tend to be thorough. They dig up all sorts of interesting evidence." I washed my hands slowly, letting the implications sink in. Carson stood frozen, processing the threat. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "Just a guy who believes in marriage," I said, drying my hands. "Have a good evening, Carson." I left him standing in the restroom, probably wondering if I was the anonymous source who'd destroyed his life. The beauty of psychological warfare is that paranoia does most of the work for you. Thursday morning, Lila dressed carefully for her HR interview. She chose a conservative blue suit and minimal jewelry, projecting competence and professionalism. I made her coffee and toast, playing the supportive husband role. "You'll do fine," I assured her. "Just be honest." "Right," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Honest." After she left, I called in sick to work and drove to Meridian Financial. I wanted to observe the aftermath of her interview, see how the investigation was progressing. I parked in the visitor lot and walked into the lobby, claiming I was there to take Lila to lunch. The receptionist called upstairs, then informed me that Mrs. Morrison was in meetings all afternoon. "HR stuff," she whispered conspiratorially. "They've been interviewing people all week about that Carson situation. Must be disruptive for everyone. You have no idea. Half the office is walking on eggshells wondering what else they're going to find." I thanked her and left, but not before noticing the security cameras positioned throughout the lobby. If Carson and Lila had been meeting in the building, there would be footage. HR would have access to that footage. That evening, Lila came home looking exhausted. She poured herself a large glass of wine before even taking off her coat. "How did the interview go?" I asked. "Fine. Standard questions about my working relationship with Carson, whether I observed any inappropriate behavior, that sort of thing." "What did you tell them?" "That Carson was professional but demanding, that he expected excellence from his team, that I never witnessed anything inappropriate." She was sticking to her script, but I could see the strain. Lying under official questioning was different from lying to your husband over dinner. "Did they ask about anyone specific?" A few names came up. Other employees who worked closely with Carson. "They're being very thorough." "I'm sure you handled it well." She nodded, but her hands were still shaking. Something had rattled her during that interview. Friday brought more bad news. Lila's phone rang during dinner, and she stepped outside to take the call. Through the kitchen window, I watched her pace our back deck, gesturing frantically. When she came back inside, her face was ashen. "That was Janet Reeves," she said. "Carson's replacement. She wants to meet with me Monday morning to discuss my role going forward." "That sounds positive." "Does it?" She laughed bitterly. "They're reviewing all of Carson's personnel decisions from the past year. Every hire, every promotion, every raise. If there's no documentation supporting a decision, they're reversing it." My heart rate quickened. What does that mean for you? It means the promotion Carson promised me is off the table. Officially, it never existed. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm sorry. I know how much that meant to you. She pulled away. You don't understand. This isn't just about a promotion. They're questioning everything Carson did, looking for patterns of favoritism or misconduct. If they think I was involved in anything inappropriate, were you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Lila stared at me, probably wondering how much I suspected. Of course not, she said finally. But perception matters in corporate environments. If people think there was something improper about my relationship with Carson, it could destroy my career. Then we'll figure out a way to protect your reputation. We? We're a team, remember? Your problems are my problems. She smiled for the first time all week, though it didn't reach her eyes. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. That weekend, I did some research on Janet Reeves. She had a reputation for cleaning house when she took over troubled departments. Her LinkedIn profile showed a pattern of short-term assignments at various Meridian offices, always brought in to investigate problems and implement solutions. I also researched divorce proceedings in our county. Pamela Mitchell had filed on grounds of adultery and emotional distress, seeking half of their marital assets plus alimony. The case was moving quickly, which suggested her evidence was overwhelming. Sunday evening, I was working in the garage when our neighbor Mrs. Patterson knocked on the door. Jack, do you have a minute? She asked, glancing around nervously. Mrs. Patterson was 72, widowed, and had lived next door for 15 years. She was also the unofficial neighborhood watch coordinator, which meant she noticed everything. What can I do for you? I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to mention something I observed last week. On Wednesday evening, around 8 o'clock, I saw Lila in the parking lot behind that office building on Maple Street. She was talking to a man I didn't recognize. My pulse quickened. Which office building? The one with the financial companies. I was driving back from my book club and happened to notice her car. The conversation looked intense. Probably work-related, I said casually. She's been dealing with some personnel changes. I'm sure that's all it was. But the man seemed upset about something. I just thought you should know in case she mentioned feeling unsafe at work. Mrs. Patterson was giving me an out, a way to interpret the information innocently. But we both knew what she'd really seen. Thanks for looking out for us, I said. Lila's been under a lot of stress lately. Of course. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. After she left, I sat in my garage thinking about the implications. If Mrs. Patterson had seen them, other people might have too. Lila and Carson were taking increasingly desperate risks to coordinate their stories. Monday morning, Lila dressed even more carefully than usual. She chose a black suit that made her look serious and competent, like someone who would never compromise her professional integrity. Wish me luck, she said, kissing my cheek. You don't need luck. You need to trust yourself. After she left, I called Reggie and asked him to meet me for coffee. We sat in a diner downtown, away from anyone who might know us. You look like a man with a plan, Reggie observed, stirring sugar into his coffee. Maybe. How much do you know about corporate investigations? Enough. My ex-wife worked in HR for 20 years. Why? I explained the situation at Lila's company, leaving out the personal details. Sounds like they're building a case, Reggie said. HR doesn't interview people for fun. If they're asking specific questions about specific relationships, they already know the answers. What happens next? Depends on what they find. If it's just poor judgment, maybe a reprimand or transfer. If there's evidence of quid pro quo, that's grounds for termination. And if someone lied during the investigation? That's automatic termination, plus possible legal consequences if they signed any false statements. I absorbed this information while watching traffic pass outside the diner window. Lila was walking a tightrope, and she didn't realize how far she could fall. That afternoon, I received a text from Lila. Meeting went badly. We'll explain tonight. She came home at 7:30, looking defeated. Her carefully chosen outfit was wrinkled, her makeup smeared from crying. They know, she said without preamble. Know what? About Carson and me. They have security footage of us meeting in the parking lot. Phone records showing calls and texts outside business hours. Janet Reeves laid it all out like a prosecutor presenting evidence. I sat down heavily, pretending to process this revelation for the first time. What exactly do they know? That we had an inappropriate relationship, that he promised me a promotion in exchange for personal favors, that we met secretly to coordinate our stories for the HR investigation. Did you admit to anything? I denied everything, but the evidence is overwhelming. Janet said they're reviewing my employment file and will make a decision about my future with the company by Friday. I took her hands in mine. Whatever happens, we'll get through this. Will we? She looked at me with desperate eyes. Jack, I need to tell you something. I haven't been completely honest about my relationship with Carson. Here it was, the moment of truth I'd been waiting for. What do you mean? We were involved, romantically. It started as a professional relationship, but it became something more. He promised me a promotion, and I thought it was my chance to finally get ahead. She was still lying, even now, framing it as romance instead of prostitution, claiming it evolved naturally instead of admitting she'd initiated the transaction. But at least she was acknowledging the basic facts. How long? I asked. 3 months. It's been over for weeks, ever since his wife filed for divorce. But the damage is done. I stood up and walked to the window, letting her think I was processing the betrayal. In reality, I was calculating my next move. Do you love him? I asked, without turning around. No, she said quickly. It wasn't about love. It was about opportunity, about getting the recognition I deserved. I know that doesn't make it right, but I need you to understand my motivations. I turned back to face her. What do you want from me? Forgiveness, support, a chance to rebuild what we had before I made this terrible mistake. And if you lose your job? Then I'll find another one. It might take time, but I'll prove myself again. We can start over. She was still living in fantasy, believing she could control the narrative and minimize the consequences. She didn't understand that some mistakes echo forever. I need time to think, I said. Of course. Take all the time you need. Just please don't give up on us. That night, I lay awake planning phase 2 of my revenge. Carson was already destroyed, career over, marriage ended, reputation ruined, but Lila still thought she could salvage something from the wreckage. It was time to show her how wrong she was. The next morning, I created another anonymous email account and composed a message to Janet Reeves. Ms. Reeves, as someone concerned about Meridian Financial's reputation, I wanted to provide additional information about the Carson Mitchell situation. I have evidence that his relationship with employee Lila Morrison began before his personnel review of her performance. I also have documentation showing they coordinated their responses to your HR investigation. This information is provided in the interest of corporate integrity and employee accountability. I attached screenshots of text messages between Lila and Carson from the past week, including their discussion about sticking to the story and making sure our timelines match. The email was scheduled to arrive Wednesday morning, giving Janet Reeves exactly what she needed to justify terminating Lila for cause. Phase 2 was in motion. Soon, Lila would learn that some raises come with a price too high to pay. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of gray November sky that makes everything look hopeless. Lila left for work wearing her armor, the navy blue suit she reserved for important meetings and difficult conversations. She kissed my forehead before leaving, a gesture that felt more like goodbye than see you later. Whatever happens today, she said, I want you to know I'm grateful for your patience. I watched her drive away, knowing it would be the last normal morning of her career. At 9:15, my anonymous email delivered itself to Janet Reeves's inbox. I imagined her reading it with her morning coffee, cross-referencing the attached evidence with her existing files. By 9:30, she would have everything she needed to end Lila's employment and protect the company from liability. I went to work installing crown molding in a doctor's office, keeping my phone nearby in case Lila called. The physical work felt good, measuring, cutting, fitting pieces together with precision. Unlike marriage or revenge, carpentry followed logical rules. If you measured correctly and made clean cuts, everything fit together perfectly. At 11:43, my phone buzzed. "Jack?" Lila's voice was barely a whisper. "Can you come get me?" "Where are you?" "In the parking lot at work. They terminated me. Security escorted me out." I found her sitting in her Honda, staring at a cardboard box containing her personal effects. Her face was streaked with mascara, and her hands were shaking. "What happened?" I asked, sliding into the passenger seat. "Janet Reeves called me into her office this morning. She had more evidence, text messages between Carson and me from this week. Someone's been monitoring our communications." "What kind of messages?" "Conversations about coordinating our stories for HR. Planning what to say in interviews. It looked like we were conspiring to cover up the relationship." She was right, of course. That's exactly what they'd been doing. "Did you explain the context?" I tried, but it didn't matter. Janet said the company couldn't trust employees who lie during official investigations. She terminated me for cause, which means no severance package, no unemployment benefits, nothing. I put my arm around her shoulders. "We'll figure this out." "Will we?" "Jack, I lied to you, I lied to HR, and now I'm unemployed with a termination for cause on my record. No financial company will hire me after this." She was beginning to understand the scope of her situation. Good. Understanding was the first step toward accepting consequences. "Let's go home," I said. "We can talk through options when you're feeling calmer." That evening, Lila called her sister Michelle in Portland, explaining the situation in sanitized terms. She described it as a misunderstanding, a case of corporate politics and unfair treatment. Michelle offered sympathy and suggested Lila consider relocating for a fresh start. After the call, Lila looked at me hopefully. Maybe Michelle's right. Maybe we should consider moving somewhere with better opportunities. "Run away, you mean?" "Not run away, start over, build something new together." I pretended to consider this. "What about the house, my business, our whole life here?" "We could sell the house, liquidate your equipment, start fresh somewhere nobody knows about this situation." She was still trying to control the narrative, to minimize consequences through geographic relocation. It was time to introduce her to reality. "Lila, we need to talk about something." "What?" "I know about the motel." The color drained from her face. "What motel?" "The Red Roof Inn on 5th Street, room 237. I saw you there with Carson." She opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. The lie died on her lips. "How long have you known?" "Since the beginning. I overheard your phone call that night in the garage." "Then why didn't you say anything?" "I wanted to see how far you'd go, how much you'd lie to protect yourself." She stared at me like I was a stranger. "You've been manipulating me this entire time." "I've been watching you manipulate everyone else. Your husband, your boss, HR investigators. I wanted to understand who you'd become. And who have I become? Someone who sells herself for promotions. Someone who lies without conscience. Someone who destroys other people's marriages for personal gain." She slapped me. Hard. The sound echoed through our kitchen like a gunshot. "How dare you judge me?" she hissed. "You have no idea what it's like being overlooked, undervalued, watching less qualified people get promoted because they play politics better. So you decided to play a different game entirely." "I decided to use every advantage I had. Carson wanted me, and I wanted advancement. It was a business transaction. It was prostitution. She slapped me again, harder this time. Don't you dare reduce it to that. What Carson and I had was complicated, but it wasn't just about money or position. There were genuine feelings involved. Whose feelings? Yours or his wife's when she found out? Lila's face crumpled. You sent those messages to Pamela, didn't you? Someone had to tell her the truth. You destroyed 2 marriages to satisfy your ego. I destroyed 1 marriage to save another. Carson's marriage was over the moment he started negotiating raises in motel rooms. She sat down heavily, finally beginning to grasp the scope of my involvement. The anonymous tips to HR, that was you too. Justice has many messengers. Justice? She laughed bitterly. This isn't justice. This is revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. We stared at each other across our kitchen table, 22 years of marriage reduced to mutual recognition of betrayal. What happens now? She asked. Now you face the consequences of your choices. And us? What happens to us? That depends on what you do next. Thursday morning, Lila began making phone calls to potential employers. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Initial interest based on her resume, followed by awkward questions about her departure from Meridian Financial, ending with promises to keep her resume on file. By afternoon, she was crying into her wine glass. They all know, she said. Word travels fast in financial services. I'm blacklisted. Maybe you should consider a different industry. Doing what? I've spent 15 years building expertise in corporate finance. That's all I know. You could go back to school, learn something new. With what money? We have maybe 6 months of savings, and that's if we're careful. She was right about our financial situation. My carpentry business provided steady income, but not enough to support extended unemployment or career retraining. We'll manage, I said. People survive worse setbacks. Do they? Jack, I'm 43 years old with a termination for cause on my record. Even if I could start over in a new field, I'd be competing with people half my age who don't have my baggage. Friday brought more bad news. Lila received a certified letter from Meridian Financial's legal department, informing her that the company was reviewing her actions for potential criminal charges related to fraud and conspiracy. They're trying to scare me, she said, reading the letter for the 3rd time. Are they succeeding? Terrified. If they file charges, I could face jail time. Then maybe you should consider cooperating with their investigation. Cooperating how? Tell them everything. About Carson's pattern of behavior, about other employees who might have been pressured into similar arrangements. Help them understand the full scope of the problem. You want me to become a whistleblower? I want you to take responsibility for your actions and help prevent other women from being exploited. She considered this, probably weighing the benefits of cooperation against the risks of further exposure. If I cooperate, will you forgive me? The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't ready to cross. I don't know, I said honestly. Forgiveness isn't something you can negotiate. Then what do you want from me? I want you to understand what you've done. To yourself, to me, to Carson's wife, to every woman who tries to advance through merit instead of manipulation. I understand more than you think. Do you? Because you're still talking about this like it happened to you instead of something you chose to do. Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee on our back deck when Mrs. Patterson appeared at the fence separating our yards. Jack, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right? I've noticed Lila hasn't been going to work this week. She's between jobs right now, I said carefully. I see. Well, if you need anything, groceries, errands, someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to ask. Mrs. Patterson was fishing for information, probably having heard rumors through the neighborhood network. In a community like ours, professional scandals traveled faster than wildfire. Thank you. We appreciate the support. Of course, these things have a way of working out, you know. Sometimes what seems like a setback opens doors to better opportunities. After she left, I realized our private crisis was becoming public knowledge. Soon, everyone would know about Lila's termination and the reasons behind it. Her professional reputation wasn't the only thing at stake. Her social standing in our community was crumbling too. That afternoon, Lila emerged from our bedroom wearing sweatpants and one of my old t-shirts. She'd been hiding inside for 2 days, avoiding phone calls and ignoring emails. "I've been thinking," she said, sitting beside me on the couch. "About what?" "About what you said, about taking responsibility. And I want to call Janet Reeves on Monday, offer to cooperate with their investigation." "What changed your mind?" "The legal letter. If they're considering criminal charges, I need to get ahead of this. Show them I'm willing to help rather than obstruct." It was a pragmatic decision rather than a moral one, but I'd take what I could get. "What will you tell them?" "Everything. How Carson approached me, what he promised, how the arrangement worked. If there were other women involved, they deserve to know they're not alone." Sunday evening, Lila spent 3 hours preparing for her call to Janet Reeves. She outlined every interaction with Carson, documented dates and locations, and compiled a list of other female employees who might have experienced similar pressure. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, watching her organize evidence of her own misconduct. "No, but I don't see any alternatives. If I cooperate, maybe they'll focus on Carson's pattern of behavior rather than prosecuting individual victims." "Is that how you see yourself? As a victim?" She looked up from her notes. "Partly, yes. Carson had power over my career, my financial future. He created a situation where I felt like I had to choose between my principles and my professional survival." "And you chose survival." "I chose what seemed like the best option at the time. I was wrong, but I can't change that now." It was the closest she'd come to genuine accountability, not perfect, but progress. Monday morning, Lila called Janet Reeves and requested a meeting. Janet agreed to see her that afternoon, probably curious about what additional information Lila might provide. "I'm nervous," Lila admitted as she prepared to leave. "You should be. This conversation will determine whether you're treated as a cooperating witness or a co-conspirator." "Thanks for the encouragement." "I'm not trying to encourage you. I'm trying to help you understand the stakes." She nodded grimly and drove away, carrying a folder full of evidence that would either save her from prosecution or guarantee it. 3 hours later, she returned, looking emotionally drained but relieved. "How did it go?" "Better than expected." Janet listened to everything, asked detailed questions, and seemed genuinely interested in understanding Carson's methods. "Did she make any promises about criminal charges?" "No promises, but she indicated that cooperation would be viewed favorably by the legal department." "What happens next?" "They might ask me to provide a formal statement or testify if they decide to pursue charges against Carson. But for now, I've done what I can." That evening, we ordered pizza and watched a movie together, the first normal activity we'd shared since her termination. It felt strange, like we were playing roles in a marriage that no longer existed. "Jack," she said during the credits. "Yeah? Do you think we can get through this?" I considered the question carefully. "I think we can survive it. Whether we can rebuild what we had, that's a different question." "What would it take? For you to trust me again?" "Time, honesty, proof that you understand why this was wrong, not just that it had bad consequences. And if I can provide those things, then maybe we have a chance." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was hope. Sometimes that's enough to start rebuilding from the wreckage of betrayal. Tuesday brought news that Carson Mitchell had been arrested on charges of harassment, abuse of authority, and conspiracy to defraud his employer. The local newspaper ran a small story about it, describing him as a former financial executive, without mentioning Meridian by name. Lila read the article 3 times, probably wondering if her cooperation had contributed to his arrest. "Do you feel guilty?" I asked. "About Carson? No. He created the situation. If he's facing consequences, that's his responsibility." "And about us?" "Every day. Jack, I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know I regret every moment of it." "Which part do you regret? The affair or getting caught?" "Both, honestly. But mostly I regret hurting you and damaging our marriage for something that was never worth the cost." It was the most honest thing she'd said since this began. Wednesday afternoon, I was installing baseboards in a new construction project when Reggie called. "You seen the news about that Carson guy?" he asked. "Yeah, Lila's been following the story." "How's she handling all this?" "Better than I expected. She's cooperating with the investigation, trying to make things right." "And you? How are you handling it?" I set down my nail gun and stepped outside where I could talk freely. "I'm angry, Reggie. Angrier than I've ever been in my life. At her, at the situation, at him for creating it, at her for participating in it, at myself for not seeing it sooner." "What are you going to do with all that anger?" "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to forgive her and move on. Part of me wants to make sure she pays for what she did. Those don't have to be mutually exclusive." "What do you mean?" "You can forgive someone and still hold them accountable. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it never happened." "So, what does accountability look like?" "That's between you and her. But whatever you decide, make sure it's about justice, not just revenge." After we hung up, I thought about the distinction Reggie had drawn. Was my campaign against Lila and Carson about justice or revenge? Did it matter as long as the outcome was appropriate? Thursday evening, Lila received a call from Janet Reeves with an update on the investigation. "They found evidence of at least 3 other women Carson pressured into similar arrangements," Lila reported after hanging up. "All of them received promotions or raises after beginning relationships with him. Will they face consequences too?" Janet didn't say, but she thanked me for coming forward and said my cooperation has been valuable. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved that I'm not the only one, guilty that I didn't speak up sooner. If I'd reported Carson months ago, maybe those other women wouldn't have been put in similar positions." "You can't change the past." "No, but I can learn from it. Jack, I want to do something to help other women who might face similar situations." "Like what?" "I don't know yet. Maybe volunteer with organizations that support workplace harassment victims. Maybe speak publicly about my experience." "Are you ready for that kind of exposure?" "I don't know if anyone's ever ready, but if my story can prevent other women from making my mistakes, maybe something good can come from this disaster." Friday morning brought the final piece of news we'd been waiting for. Janet Reeves called to inform Lila that Meridian Financial would not be pursuing criminal charges against her, citing her cooperation and status as a victim of Carson's systematic abuse of authority. "It's over," Lila said after hanging up. "Officially, anyway." "How does it feel?" "Like I can finally breathe again, but also like I'm starting over from nothing." "Maybe that's not entirely bad." "What do you mean?" "Maybe this is a chance to build something better. A marriage based on honesty instead of secrets. A career built on merit instead of manipulation. Is that what you want? To build something better together?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was thinner than before, with new lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her hair that hadn't been there 6 months ago. The experience had aged her, but it had also stripped away the artificial confidence she'd worn like armor. "I want to try," I said. "But it has to be different this time." "Different how?" "Complete honesty. No secrets, no hidden agendas, no separate plans for the future." "I can do that." "And accountability. You need to make amends for what you did, not just to me, but to everyone who was hurt." "I'm ready for that too." "Then maybe we have a chance." She smiled for the first time in weeks, and I saw a glimpse of the woman I'd married, flawed, human, but capable of growth. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For holding me accountable without destroying me completely." "The accountability isn't finished yet. I know, but I'm ready for whatever comes next." Looking back, I realized my revenge had been more complete than I'd originally planned. I'd destroyed Carson's career and marriage, ended Lila's affair and professional ambitions, and forced both of them to face consequences for their actions. But somewhere in the process, I'd also created an opportunity for genuine redemption. Whether Lila would take that opportunity remained to be seen. But for the first time since discovering her betrayal, I believed our marriage might survive, different than before, but possibly stronger for having been broken and rebuilt on a foundation of truth instead of comfortable lies. The reckoning was complete. Now came the harder work of forgiveness and rebuilding. But that's a different story, one that would be written day by day in the choices we made going forward. Some raises I'd learned cost more than anyone should be willing to pay. But sometimes, the price of accountability creates the possibility of something better than what was lost. 3 weeks after the investigation concluded, Lila started working at a local nonprofit that helped women transition back into the workforce after major life changes. The pay was a third of what she'd made at Meridian Financial, but she came home each day with something she'd lost during her corporate climb: genuine satisfaction with her work. "I helped a woman today who'd been out of the job market for 12 years, she told me over dinner. She was terrified of interviews, convinced she had nothing to offer. By the end of our session, she was sitting up straighter, making eye contact, talking about her skills instead of her gaps." Sounds rewarding. It is, different from what I'm used to, but meaningful in a way I'd forgotten work could be. I watched her face as she spoke, noting the absence of the calculating expression that had become her default during the Carson period. She looked younger somehow, despite the stress lines that hadn't faded. "Any regrets about leaving the corporate world?" "Every day," she said honestly. "I miss the salary, the status, the feeling of climbing towards something bigger, but I don't miss the person I was becoming." It was progress, not complete transformation, but acknowledgement that her previous path had been corrupting her character. The following week, I received an unexpected phone call at work. "Is this Jack Morrison?" The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "Speaking." "My name is Pamela Mitchell. I believe you knew my ex-husband, Carson." I set down my circular saw and walked outside where I could talk privately. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sorry about your situation." "Are you?" "Because I have reason to believe you're the person who sent me evidence of Carson's affair." There was no point in denying it. "I am." "I wanted to thank you." That surprised me. "Thank me?" "For giving me the truth. I suspected something was wrong, but Carson was skilled at making me doubt my instincts. Your evidence confirmed what I already knew in my heart. I'm sorry it was necessary." "So am I. But I'm grateful it came from someone who understood the stakes. Another woman might have warned Carson first, given him time to cover his tracks or manipulate the situation." "What will you do now?" "Rebuild. The divorce settlement was favorable, and I'm using some of the money to start a foundation that provides legal support for women dealing with workplace harassment." That sounds like important work. It is. And I wanted you to know that your wife's cooperation with the Meridian investigation has been valuable. Her testimony helped us understand Carson's pattern of behavior, which strengthened our case against him. After she hung up, I realized that my revenge had created ripple effects I hadn't anticipated. Carson's downfall had empowered his ex-wife to help other women, while Lila's cooperation had contributed to a broader pattern of accountability. That evening, I told Lila about Pamela's call. "She thanked you?" Lila looked surprised. "For giving her the evidence she needed." "How do you feel about that?" "Conflicted. I'm glad something positive came from the situation, but I can't pretend my motives were entirely noble. What were your motives? I considered the question carefully. Initially, pure revenge. I wanted to destroy both of you for betraying our marriage. And later? Later I wanted justice. For Pamela, for other women Carson might have exploited, for the principle that actions should have consequences. Do you think you got both? I think I got something more complicated than either. Revenge would have been satisfying but empty. Justice would have been righteous but cold. What actually happened was messier but more human. More human how? It created opportunities for redemption. Carson lost everything, but his ex-wife gained the resources to help other women. You lost your career, but found work that actually matters to you. I got my revenge, but also learned something about the cost of deception. What did you learn? That destroying someone else doesn't heal your own wounds. That has to come from something else entirely. Like what? Like forgiveness, like rebuilding trust, like choosing to believe people can change. She reached across the table and took my hand. Do you believe I can change? I believe you're already changing. The question is whether I can change too. Change how? Learn to trust again. Let go of the anger I've been carrying. Stop looking for evidence that you're still lying to me. Are you still looking for that? Every day. I check your phone, monitor your computer, pay attention to where you go and who you talk to. It's exhausting. I know you do. I don't blame you. Maybe you should. Maybe healthy relationships don't require that level of surveillance. What would it take for you to stop? Time, consistency, proof that you're committed to transparency. How long? I don't know. As long as it takes. A month later, Lila came home with news that Carson had pled guilty to multiple charges and been sentenced to 2 years in prison, plus restitution to his victims. How do you feel about that? I asked. Sad mostly. Not for him, but for the waste of it all. He was talented, successful, had everything most people want, but he threw it away because he couldn't resist abusing his power. Do you think he deserved prison? I think he deserved consequences proportional to his actions. Whether that's prison, I'm not qualified to judge. The victims seemed to think it was appropriate. Then I trust their judgment. They're the ones who have to live with what he did. That weekend, we attended a neighborhood barbecue, our first social event since Lila's termination. I watched her interact with people who knew about her situation, noting how she handled their questions and comments. How's the new job? Asked Tom Henderson, our neighbor from 3 houses down. Different, but rewarding, Lila replied. I'm learning that helping people can be more satisfying than climbing corporate ladders. Must be quite an adjustment after finance. It is, but sometimes major changes force you to discover what you really value. She was handling it well, acknowledging the transition without dwelling on the reasons behind it, projecting confidence without defensiveness. Later, Mrs. Patterson approached us near the dessert table. Lila, I wanted you to know that what you're doing at the Women's Center is wonderful, she said. My granddaughter was struggling to re-enter the workforce after her divorce, and the workshop you ran gave her the confidence she needed. I'm so glad it helped. It did. More than you know. She has an interview next week for a position she never would have applied for before. After Mrs. Patterson walked away, I realized that Lila's fall from corporate grace had somehow elevated her standing in our community. People respected her for turning her mistakes into service to others. That felt good, Lila said quietly. It should. You're making a real difference. I wish I'd discovered that earlier, before I got so focused on status and salary that I lost sight of what actually matters. Better late than never. Is it? Sometimes I wonder if I would have found this path without being forced off the other one. Maybe not. Maybe the corporate world would have consumed you completely. It was already consuming me. I just didn't realize it until I lost everything and had to rebuild from scratch. That night, as we got ready for bed, Lila asked me a question that had been building between us for weeks. Jack, Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me completely? I brushed my teeth while considering my answer. I think I'm already forgiving you, I said finally. Not all at once, but gradually, as I see evidence that you understand what went wrong and why. What kind of evidence? The way you talk about your mistakes without making excuses, the work you're doing to help other women, the patience you show when I'm still suspicious or angry. I'll keep providing that evidence as long as you need it. It might take a while. I know, but our marriage is worth the effort. Is it? Sometimes I wonder if we're just going through the motions because divorce seems scarier than staying together. Is that how it feels to you? Sometimes. Other times it feels like we're building something new and potentially stronger than what we had before. Which feeling is more accurate? I think they're both true simultaneously. We're grieving the marriage we lost while trying to create the marriage we could have. That sounds exhausting. It is. But the alternative is giving up, and I'm not ready to do that yet. Neither am I. 2 months later, I made a decision that surprised both of us. I stopped checking Lila's phone and computer, not because I'd stopped caring about honesty, but because constant surveillance was poisoning whatever trust we were trying to rebuild. "You're not going to look through my messages anymore?" she asked when I told her. "No. If you're going to lie to me, I'd rather find out naturally than live like a detective in my own home. What if I am lying about something? Then our marriage will end, and we'll both move on. But I can't build a relationship on the assumption that you're deceiving me. That's a leap of faith. It's the only way forward that doesn't involve permanent suspicion. What if I betray that faith? Then you'll have to live with the consequences, just like you're living with the consequences of your last betrayal. And you'll have to live with being wrong about giving me another chance. Right. But I'd rather risk being wrong about your character than guarantee being wrong about the possibility of redemption." 3 months after that conversation, Lila was promoted to program director at the Women's Center. The salary was still modest compared to her corporate days, but she celebrated like she'd won the lottery. "They're trusting me to expand the program statewide," she told me over dinner. "We'll be helping women in rural communities who don't have access to career transition services. That's a significant responsibility." "It is. And I earned it through merit, not manipulation. That feels better than any promotion I received at Meridian. Because you know it's legitimate? Because I know I deserve it. Not because of who I slept with or what deals I made, but because of the work I've done and the results I've achieved." How does that change how you see yourself? It reminds me who I was before I got lost in corporate ambition, someone who cared more about contribution than compensation. Do you miss that person? I missed her desperately during the Carson period. I'm grateful to have found her again. That night, for the first time since discovering her affair, I made love to my wife without thinking about her betrayal. It felt like crossing a bridge I hadn't realized I'd been approaching. Afterward, as we lay together in the darkness, Lila asked me another question. "Do you think we're going to make it?" "Make it how?" "Stay married, rebuild what we had, create something worth keeping." I considered this carefully. 6 months ago, I would have said no without hesitation. 3 months ago, I would have said maybe. Now I felt cautiously optimistic. "I think we have a chance," I said. "A real chance, not just wishful thinking." "What changed?" "You did. I did. Our understanding of what marriage requires." "Which is what?" "Honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Accountability, even when it's painful. Forgiveness, even when it's undeserved." "Do you think I deserved forgiveness?" "I think you earned the opportunity to be forgiven through the changes you made and the work you did to repair the damage." "And do you think you deserve to have your trust betrayed?" "Nobody deserves betrayal. But I think I contributed to the conditions that made it possible." "How?" "By taking our marriage for granted, by assuming loyalty without nurturing it, By not paying attention to your growing dissatisfaction with your career and our financial situation. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, but it explains some of the context. People don't usually cheat when they feel valued and supported at home. I felt valued by you. The problem was that I stopped valuing myself except in terms of professional achievement. And when that achievement seemed impossible through legitimate means, I convinced myself that illegitimate means were justified by the circumstances. Do you still believe that? No. I understand now that compromising your integrity for external rewards always costs more than it pays. What did it cost you? My self-respect. My marriage almost. My career. My reputation. The trust of people I care about. Was any promotion worth that price? No promotion could have been worth that price. But I was so focused on the potential reward that I ignored the guaranteed costs. And now? Now I understand that the only achievements worth pursuing are ones that make you proud of who you become in the process of earning them. It was the kind of insight that only comes from losing everything and having to rebuild from the foundation up. Lila had been forced to confront fundamental questions about identity, values, and purpose that most people avoid their entire lives. A year after Carson's arrest, Lila received an invitation to speak at a conference about workplace harassment and recovery. She was nervous about the public exposure, but decided it was important to share her story. "What will you tell them?" I asked as she prepared her remarks. "The truth. That I made terrible choices for what seemed like good reasons. That the consequences were more severe than I anticipated. That recovery is possible but requires complete honesty about what went wrong. Are you ready for people to judge you? Some people will judge me no matter what I say. Others might learn something from my mistakes that helps them avoid similar situations. Which group matters more? The second group. If my story prevents even one woman from making my choices, the embarrassment will be worth it." The speech was well received, generating follow-up invitations and media coverage that positioned Lila as an advocate for workplace integrity. She'd transformed her scandal into a platform for helping others navigate similar challenges. "How does it feel to be known for your mistakes?" I asked, after reading a newspaper article about her presentation. "Better than being known for nothing at all," she replied. "At least now my experience serves a purpose beyond just cautioning others about the consequences of poor judgment." Do you think you would have found this purpose without going through the Carson situation? Honestly, probably not. I was too focused on climbing the corporate ladder to consider whether my ladder was leaning against the right wall. And now you're sure it is? As sure as anyone can be. The work I'm doing aligns with my values in a way that corporate finance never did. Even though the pay is lower, especially because the pay is lower, it forces me to find satisfaction in the work itself rather than the external rewards. Do you miss the financial security? I miss not worrying about money, but I don't miss the person I was becoming when money was my primary motivation. Who were you becoming? Someone willing to compromise anything for professional advancement? Someone who measured worth by salary and status rather than character and contribution? And who are you becoming now? Someone who understands that true security comes from integrity, not income. Someone who values relationships over achievements. Including our relationship? Especially our relationship. Jack, I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I want you to know that rebuilding our marriage has been more rewarding than any promotion I ever received. Even though it's been difficult? Because it's been difficult. Easy things don't teach you much about yourself or test your commitment to growth. What has our rebuilding process taught you? That love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day. That trust isn't given. It's earned through consistent behavior over time. That forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to move forward despite remembering. And what has it taught you about me? That you're stronger than I gave you credit for. That your love is deeper than I deserved, That your capacity for forgiveness is greater than my capacity for betrayal. I'm not sure about that last part. I am. You could have destroyed me completely, but instead you held me accountable while creating space for redemption. That takes more strength than revenge. Maybe. Or maybe I was just too tired to sustain that level of anger. Either way, I'm grateful. 2 years after the investigation, we renewed our wedding vows in a small ceremony attended by family and close friends. It wasn't about pretending the betrayal never happened. It was about acknowledging that we'd survived it and chosen to build something new together. Do you, Jack, take Lila to be your wife, knowing her fully as she is today? I do. Do you, Lila, take Jack to be your husband, committing to the honesty and transparency this relationship requires? I do. The vows were different this time, more specific about expectations, more realistic about challenges, more intentional about the daily work of marriage. During the reception, Reggie pulled me aside. You look happy, he observed. I am, differently than before, but genuinely. Different how? Before, I was happy because I thought I knew who Lila was and could predict how she'd behave. Now I'm happy because I know she's capable of growth and committed to earning my trust. That sounds more sustainable. It is. The first kind of happiness depended on control and certainty. This kind depends on faith and choice. Any regrets about giving her another chance? None. Even if it doesn't work out long term, I'm proud of how we handled the recovery process. And if someone asked your advice about dealing with infidelity, I'd tell them that revenge feels satisfying, but doesn't heal anything. That accountability is necessary, but not sufficient. That rebuilding requires both people to become better versions of themselves. Think Lila would give the same advice? Probably. She'd add that the person who betrayed the trust has to do most of the work to rebuild it. Has she done that work? More than I expected. More than I required. She's transformed her shame into service and her mistakes into wisdom. And you? What have you transformed? My anger into understanding, my need for revenge into capacity for forgiveness, my fear of being hurt again into willingness to be vulnerable. That's a lot of transformation for both of you. It had to be. The people we were before couldn't have survived what happened. We had to become different people to create a different kind of marriage. Better people? More honest people. More intentional people. People who understand that love requires daily choice rather than just initial commitment. As I watched Lila talking with guests at our reception, I realized that my wife's demand for a raise had ultimately given us both something more valuable than money, the opportunity to discover who we really were and who we could become together. The price had been enormous: trust, security, reputation, career, peace of mind. But the result was a marriage based on truth rather than assumption, choice rather than habit, growth rather than comfort. Some raises, I'd learned, cost everything you have, but sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what's truly worth keeping.